This might sound ironic coming from me, but being online all the time just doesn't feel impressive anymore. And I say that as someone who's worked in tech for over a decade. Being online hasn't been optional for me. It's been my job, my environment, my normal. For a long time, I really believed that constant availability meant that responding quickly meant I was competent, that being plugged in meant I was relevant. And for years, that belief worked. But at some point, and I honestly can't point to a single moment, it started to feel heavy. Not dramatic, just quietly draining in a way that accumulated. I would close my laptop at the end of the day and notice that nothing really shut off inside me. My body was home, but my attention wasn't. I'd stay on without even thinking about it. Not because I wanted more stimulation, but because my nervous system just didn't know how to stop. And because my work already lived online, that felt normal. It didn't raise red flags, it just felt like modern life. It took a while for me to realize that I wasn't tired because I was doing too much, I was tired because I was never disengaging. Working in tech changes how you see the internet. You can't unsee how attention is shaped, how urgency is created, how engagement is rewarded. So stepping back didn't feel like a rebellion or a rejection. It felt like clarity. I didn't delete everything, I didn't disappear, but just not defaulting to being online when I knew I didn't have to be. So that shift started to show up in my evenings initially because if I'm honest, my evenings didn't feel like rest. It felt like a softer continuation of the workday. Yes, I was looking at different screens. Instead of looking at my laptop, I was looking at my phone and the TV and maybe my iPad. But wouldn't even say that that was downtime. At some point, I realized that my evenings never allowed my system to settle, and no amount of weekends or holidays were going to fix that. So I started paying attention, just noticing how my hand would grab my phone as soon as there was a pause. And since becoming aware of this, I started letting there be a little more space. And by that, I mean just not reaching for my phone all the time. And the space felt strange at first because when you've been chronically online for years, the illness doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like unfamiliar. And you're constantly wondering, like, what if there's a notification that I need to respond to immediately? But without that constant input, I noticed that my thoughts started to surface, feelings surfaced, unfinished ideas surfaced. And I think that's why so many of us actually avoid going offline. Not because we love the internet so much, but because we're not used to being alone and bored with ourselves anymore. We're so used to constant stimulation, always having our phones on us, playing a YouTube video, which I know is ironic because you're watching one. But once you start to sit in that discomfort long enough, your feelings start to shift. I started to feel more present in a way that didn't require effort. I felt less rushed internally, less reactive. It wasn't anything dramatic, it just felt steadier. And I hadn't realized how much of my thinking had become reactive. So, how often I was just forming opinions in response to what I'd consumed instead of my own internal compass, like how much I was being influenced by what other people were saying on TikTok. And being offline more, especially in the evenings and weekends, just gave me that compass back. I started to trust my thoughts again. I felt less pressure to weigh in and less urgency to be visible all the time. There was a fear in the beginning, though, a quiet anxiety that stepped back, meaning missing something important, that if I wasn't constantly plugged in, I'd fall behind socially, professionally, culturally, I'd miss something of huge significance. But over time, that fear didn't really prove itself true. And what changed most wasn't what I knew, it was how I felt in my own life. I felt more present, more grounded, less scattered. And that's when my idea of what's cool started to really shift. Cool used to feel like being in the loop, being responsive and visible all the time. But now it feels like being more self contained, like not needing to react to everything, like being okay with not knowing every update, like having enough internal stability that you don't need constant external input. This isn't about being superior, it's not about purity. And it's definitely not about rejecting technology. As I mentioned, I still work in tech, I still use the internet, I'm still plugged in 9 to 6 p.m. I just try my best to not let it dictate the rhythm of my nervous system outside of work. And for me, being chronically offline isn't about absence, it's about intention. It's about choosing when to engage instead of being pulled into constant engagement. And especially if your job already requires you to be online all day, that distinction really matters. Because when you're online for work, your brain is already doing a lot of invisible labor, processing, switching concepts, responding to emails, Slack, phone calls, texts, WhatsApps. But without contrast, that becomes your baseline. Offline time isn't indulgent in that context, it's just maintenance. It's how you stay thoughtful instead of reactive, curious instead of cynical, present instead of depleted. I think a lot of us are quietly craving that right now, even if we don't have the language for it. We're craving less content, less stimulation, and just more space and quietness. So if you've been feeling the urge to pull back a little, to be less available, to protect your evenings, to let your weekends be quieter, you're not disengaging from life. You're recalibrating your relationship with it. Being offline isn't a rejection of the world we live in, it's a way of participating in it without burning yourself out. And honestly, to me, being chronically offline is the new cool.